Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere warm, quiet, and strangely sticky. You've just arrived on the northeast coast of Madagascar. Yes, the island shaped like a sleeping lizard next to Africa, and your shoes are already useless. The mud here grabs like it knows your name. You take them off and squish forward barefoot, carrying a bag that holds, ironically, nothing useful. Because what you need to survive here isn't GPS or snacks. It's silk. Not from a factory. Not from a worm. From spiders. Real ones. Big ones. You're about to spend the next few days learning how to turn thread spun by 8-legged artists into fishing gear. And spoiler alert, you might not catch much, but you'll gain something weirder: respect for the slowest, softest way to earn dinner. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Then drop a comment below with your city and what time it is where you are. I love seeing who's up with me tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The coast smells like salt and mango peels, and the wind carries a mix of sand and gossip. Children dart barefoot across packed earth. Their laughter sounds like bird calls as they chase each other between huts built of raffia palm and patched-up optimism. You follow a narrow path that's really just a suggestion between two rows of woven fencing. On your left, a woman is pounding cassava into flour. On your right, a goat with attitude watches your every move like it suspects you've come to steal its secrets. The village looks small, but it pulses with movement. Every lean-to, hammock, and pile of nets has a story tucked under it. Here, fishing is more than livelihood, it's choreography. The men rise before the birds, setting off in dugout canoes that look too slim to float. They don't yell. They barely talk. You quickly learn that in this part of the world, silence is part of the trade. A boy named Numbo finds you amusing. He gestures for you to follow, eyes twinkling like he knows you're not ready. You trail him past baskets of drying shrimp and onto a ridge where the beach opens up like a yawn. There, perched just above the tidal line, is something you didn't expect. A structure that looks like a minimalist art project, a wooden frame held together with vines, glinting faintly in the sun. Numbo taps it proudly. This is where they start. This is where the silk comes in. No one here is farming spiders. They're not breeding them in labs or tagging them with little trackers. The villagers just know where to find them. And more importantly, how to invite them. You walk a few minutes inland and watch as Numbo presses a banana leaf against a tree trunk. It doesn't look like much, but the spiders know. By morning, they'll have set up shop, stringing silky lines from one leaf to another like tiny engineers clocking in for a shift. Spider silk, as you'll learn, isn't just soft, it's absurdly strong. Gram for gram, it outperforms steel. But what catches you off guard is how light it feels. A single thread draped across your finger vanishes if you breathe too hard. Yet tomorrow, they'll use that thread to pull fish out of the sea. This method has no manual. No official name. The villagers don't call it biotech or sustainable harvest. They just say, this is how we do it. And they've done it for generations, passing on the technique like a lullaby sung to the tide. Historians aren't exactly sure when this practice began. Some believe it's thousands of years old, while others think it evolved alongside colonial disruptions, when traditional fishing tools became harder to get. The truth is, no one agrees. And the villagers? They don't particularly care. They're too busy preparing for low tide. As the sun dips into the ocean like it's testing the water, you feel it, a rhythm here, slow and sticky, like the silk you'll soon be helping to collect. You're not just watching history. You're being wrapped into it, thread by thread. You wake up to the sound of sweeping. Not alarms. Not roosters. Just an old woman with a broom made of palm stems, clearing sand from her doorstep like she's been doing it for centuries, and probably has. You stretch, roll off your woven mat, and remember what day it is. Silk Collection Day. Which, by the way, is way more subtle than it sounds. Numbo is already outside, chewing on a stalk of sugarcane like it's a lollipop. He tosses you one. It's your breakfast now. You chew and follow him inland, into the forest edge where trees aren't tall, but patient. Vines loop through branches like lazy snakes, and the sun filters in soft gold. You feel like you're walking into a temple made of green. Up ahead, the banana leaves they set out yesterday flutter like sleepy flags. You peer closer. That's when you see them, threads glinting in the morning light, so thin they could be mistaken for dust. But they hold. The spiders have delivered. Each thread is collected by hand, gently lifted and wound around a small wooden spindle. It takes patience, and hands steady enough to steal moonlight. You try it. On your third attempt, you sneeze and snap a strand. Numbo laughs and takes over, as if to say, "Nice try, tourist." The silk isn't collected in bulk. No one is dragging in buckets of it or sweeping webs into sacks. This is one line at a time. Slow, deliberate, ritual-like. The village treats the silk with the kind of respect you'd normally reserve for sacred texts or first editions of rare books. What's astonishing is that this silk isn't just for show. It becomes the heart of their fishing nets. The process involves looping and braiding, using locally spun plant fibers as support. But the spider silk? That's the secret ingredient. It gives the net flexibility, strength, and an almost invisible shimmer that doesn't scare the fish. There's no written blueprint for this. No ancient scroll hidden in a cave. It's oral tradition, shared around fires, demonstrated in silence, remembered by fingers rather than words. One wrong knot, and the whole net fails. One wrong thread, and the fish escape. So each person who learns this craft does so with reverence. What surprises you most isn't just the technique, it's the attitude. No one here acts like what they're doing is special. There's no self-congratulation, no boasting. This is just how it's done. Spider silk is just another tool, like fire, or patience. Yet, when scholars hear about this practice, they argue. Some believe it's exaggerated folklore. Others call it biomythology. They ask for peer-reviewed papers, for evidence, for measurements in newtons. But you're here now. You're seeing it, feeling it, sneezing into it. And it's very real. As you walk back toward the village with Numbo, your pockets full of sticky fingers and awe, he stops you and points toward the ocean. The tide is rising. Which means, tonight, the nets go in. You'll be there too. Not to fish, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but to watch, to listen. And maybe, if you're lucky, to understand just how silk and sea have held hands for generations, quietly, beneath the scientific radar. The sun begins to sink, casting honey-colored light over the village. The air feels heavier now, warm but edged with salt. Kids are still laughing somewhere, throwing shells like skipping stones, while the older folks begin their slow, practiced preparations. Tonight's tide isn't just a backdrop, it's a deadline. You follow Numbo and a few others down a narrow trail that winds through grass higher than your shoulders. Every few steps, a grasshopper the size of your thumb leaps in protest. Eventually, the trees open up to a marshy shoreline where the sea breathes in long, shallow exhales. The beach here isn't postcard perfect, it's tangled, mucky, alive. And this is where the real work begins. Numbo hands you a net. Not to use, let's not be reckless, but to hold. It's lighter than it looks, a lattice of spider silk and plant fiber, soft yet oddly firm. You run your fingers over the weave, expecting it to feel fragile, but it doesn't. It has that strange strength that comes from being tested 1,000 quiet times. The team wades in up to their knees. No boats. No motors. Just people, slowly stepping into the tide like they've made a pact with it. The net is stretched wide, but instead of being thrown or dragged, it's placed. Anchored. It's less like casting and more like setting a spell. You're told that timing is everything. The fish come in on the tide, not by accident, but in patterns so old they might as well be instinct carved in scale. The spider silk net is practically invisible underwater, glinting only if the moon hits it right. That's the trick, deception by delicacy. As the night deepens, the marsh goes quiet. Even the crickets seem to pause, like they know what's happening here deserves silence. You crouch behind a bush, watching the nets ripple softly with the tide, watching fishermen stand still as mangroves. Every so often, one of them will tug gently, checking the tension. No one speaks above a whisper. Then it happens. A sudden flurry. A shake of the net. A quiet splash. The fish are in. Not many. Just a few. Enough. That's the rhythm of this life. Never abundance, always just enough. They reel in the net like pulling up a secret. Tiny silver fish shimmer in the moonlight, their bodies caught not by brute force, but by threads spun from creatures no bigger than a button. You blink, still not quite believing. The catch is collected into shallow baskets, the kind woven during the last dry season, patched with care, lined with wet leaves. And then, they do something surprising. They release some of the fish. Numbo explains, softly, that it's not just about sustainability. It's a kind of respect. You take only what you need. Leave the rest for the ocean to remember you kindly. Back at the village, the fish are grilled whole over coconut husk embers. You sit on a low stool, surrounded by hands that know how to turn silk into supper. Someone gives you a piece, still sizzling. It tastes like smoke and ocean and something else, something you can't quite name. Maybe it's the thread. Or maybe it's the silence that caught it. You look at the net again, now coiled like a sleeping animal beside the fire. It doesn't look special, but you've seen it work. You've seen what it takes to build it, to trust it, to let it disappear beneath the tide and return with dinner. And you realize, spider silk is not just strong, it's patient. And patience, here, is a way of life. Scholars still debate the physics of it all. They want measurements, studies, repeatable results. But none of that captures this moment, this balance, this blend of biology and belief. And as you chew slowly under the starlight, you wonder if maybe that's the point. The fire crackles low as dawn starts to smudge the sky with watercolor light. You're barely awake, your fingers still smelling faintly of grilled fish, when Numbo nudges you with a grin and a steaming cup of something that smells like leaves and smoke. No time to sleep, he says softly. Not if you want to see the spiders. You follow him back down the narrow trail, this time cutting into the forest. The air is thicker here, moist with the breath of dawn. The trees are taller, older, knotted with vines and secrets. A lemur stares at you from a branch, unimpressed. You trudge on. You're headed to the sacred trees, the spider groves. No signs mark them. No fences. But every child in the village knows where they are. You duck under a branch and emerge into a clearing dappled with soft light, and you stop. You've never seen webs like these before. They shimmer like dew-laced silver across entire tree trunks. Threads run from branch to branch like cables. It's like someone built a chandelier out of spider silk and hung it in the jungle. The spiders themselves are not exactly shy. Some are as big as your hand, with legs like delicate twigs and bodies that seem to glow faintly golden. You flinch at first, but no one else seems worried. Numbo points one out to you, crouched calmly in the center of her web, her legs resting on the strands like a harpist waiting for a song. She's the best weaver in the grove, he whispers, reverently. Now comes the strange part. Harvesting. It's not what you expect. No one kills the spiders. Instead, villagers use carved wooden frames, placing them gently near the webs. The spiders climb aboard, often with the encouragement of a few drops of sugar water. Then, slowly, so slowly, you watch as the silk is drawn from their spinnerets like thread from a spool. The spider keeps spinning, unfazed, as if she's just cleaning house. The silk is wound onto tiny reels, sun-dried, and then passed to the netmakers back in the village. The entire process takes hours. Sometimes, the spider decides she's done and scampers off. That's fine. She'll be back. Or she won't. No one rushes her. You learn that one spider can produce meters of thread, but it takes dozens, sometimes hundreds, to make a single net. And not all silk is equal. The best comes from spiders that live near the mangroves, fed on a specific type of insect. There's no factory for this. No shortcut. You need time, hands, and a deep tolerance for spiders. Historians have puzzled over how these techniques developed. There are no ancient manuscripts here. No royal patents. Just generations of trial and error, passed down in quiet moments between one tide and the next. Some scholars have tried to recreate the process in labs, but the results lack something. The silence, maybe. The rhythm. Or maybe just the trust. You sit down beside one of the trees, letting the light drip through the webs onto your arms. The air hums faintly with life. A spider inches toward your elbow, curious but cautious. For a moment, it feels like you're part of something much older than any civilization you've read about. Something spun, not written. Back in the village, the silk is already being sorted. Numbo's aunt shows you how to test its strength, looping it around her fingers, tugging gently. It stretches, but doesn't break. Like people, she says, the strong ones bend. By now, you're realizing this isn't just about fishing. It's about making peace with small things. About building tools that work with the world instead of against it. You think about your sneakers, your phone, your waterproof jacket, all designed to conquer the wild. And then you look at this silk, barely visible in the sun, and realize it doesn't conquer anything. It listens. It waits. And then, it holds. By midday, the sun hangs heavy over the village, and you're sitting in the shade of a stilted hut, watching as the spider silk begins its transformation. You expect some kind of dramatic machine, maybe a spinning wheel or something with gears, but no. It's just hands. Many, many patient hands. You're handed a piece of silk, light as mist, yet strangely firm. It's barely visible against your skin. A woman named Rao begins to show you the technique. Her fingers move like dancers, folding, twisting, weaving, almost like she's braiding smoke. You try to imitate her and fail instantly. She chuckles, not unkindly, and says, "It takes years. And maybe a different kind of brain." Here, weaving is less craft and more choreography. Each net is custom-made, tailored to its owner's hand size, casting strength, and fishing style. No two nets are alike, and each has its quirks. One is shaped like a funnel. Another is nearly circular. Some look like lace. Some are tightly wound, meant to snap shut like a trap. But all of them start with the same material, threads so fine they disappear if you blink. You notice the nets aren't made in silence. As the weavers work, they hum. Not songs exactly, but more like patterns. Rhythmic loops of sound. One researcher who visited years ago claimed these humming patterns helped maintain focus and speed. Another said it was just a way to keep mosquitoes away. No one really knows. Maybe it's both. Now, here comes a fun contradiction. Even though these nets are made with the most delicate material imaginable, they're absurdly strong. Rao lets you test one. You tug. It doesn't break. You tug harder. Still nothing. Finally, you lean back, putting your full weight into it, and she quickly stops you before you launch yourself backward. "It's for fish," she says with a wink, "not wrestling." Some historians believe the knowledge of spider silk fishing once existed elsewhere, possibly even in ancient Asia or the Pacific Islands. But in Madagascar, it took on a life of its own. Here, it became a communal event, a shared rhythm between forest, spider, and sea. It's not just about catching fish, one elder told an anthropologist. It's about remembering how to catch. In the corner of the workshop, a young girl ties the final knot in her first net. Everyone claps. Someone offers her a slice of grilled banana. You realize there's no formal ceremony, no graduation. But this knot means something. It means she's now a provider. A weaver of dinners. A fisher of moments. There's a legend here, too, told by candlelight and passed down with exaggerated expressions and dramatic pauses. It says the first spider silk net wasn't woven by humans at all, but by a forest spirit who got tired of the men always ruining her river. She wove a net and left it hanging on a tree branch, just once, for the kindest fisherman she could find. That man, the legend claims, fished only for what he needed and always said thank you to the river. She liked that. Whether or not the spirit was real, the idea stuck. Fishing here isn't a job. It's a conversation, with the water, with the trees, and yes, with the spiders. You can't demand. You can't hurry. You can only ask. Politely. You're starting to understand why these nets aren't for sale. Not really. You could buy one in a market in the capital, sure, but it wouldn't feel the same. It wouldn't carry the hours of humming, the reverence, the whispers in the weaving. And maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't work as well. Before the sun sets, you're handed a net. Not to keep, just to hold. It's soft and dry, cool to the touch. You drape it between your hands, watching the late light shine through the threads. And for a moment, it doesn't feel like a net at all. It feels like a story, light enough to carry, strong enough to hold dinner, and quiet enough to be forgotten if you're not paying attention. As twilight creeps in, you follow the fishermen, men and women alike, as they prepare for a night on the water. There's no shouting, no barking of orders. Just quiet coordination. A few coconut oil lanterns are lit, casting soft flickers on the bark of nearby trees. Nets are slung over shoulders like shawls, and dugout canoes are eased into the still river. You wobble awkwardly into one of the canoes, and your guide, a wiry man named Deddy, grins at your clumsy attempt to balance. "It's okay," he whispers. "The fish won't judge you." Then he adds, "But they will swim away if you splash." As the canoe glides forward, the sky turns a deep indigo. Fireflies blink in the reeds. You dip your hand into the water, feeling how it changes with each paddle stroke, cooler near the center, warmer by the edges. Deddy explains that certain fish prefer the warmer shallows, while others, shy ones, hover in the deep pockets beneath overhanging branches. The spiders, it turns out, weren't just the source of the netting, they were also the inspiration. "They taught us where to wait," Deddy says, "and how to be patient." Tonight, the fishing is quiet. Not because there aren't fish, but because it's the new moon, and the river is dark and calm. "That's ideal," Deddy says. "The fish don't see you coming. But you still have to ask nicely." Asking, apparently, involves humming. He begins a low, rhythmic hum, barely audible, more vibration than song. Others in nearby canoes join in, until the river sounds like a choir of sleepy bees. The first throw of the net is almost theatrical. Deddy rises slightly, draws back, and lets it fly. It spreads midair like a floating jellyfish, then settles with a whisper into the water. No splash. No fuss. Just a moment of suspension, then silence. You wait. A few minutes later, he tugs the line gently. The net closes with a motion that reminds you of a sigh. When it comes up, you see glimmers of silver inside. 3 modest fish, each no longer than your hand. Not much, you think, but Deddy beams. "Enough for rice," he says. "And soup." Here, overfishing isn't a concept because the people have never had the luxury of waste. The spider silk nets aren't built for bulk. They're built for balance. Take what you need. Leave the rest. If you catch too many, the net might tear. Or worse, the forest might stop helping you. No one wants that. As the night goes on, you move from one part of the river to another. Some fishers wade waist deep into still pools, tossing their nets in spirals. Others fish from the banks, barely visible in the dark except for the slow swing of their nets and the occasional gleam of a lantern on wet hands. There's laughter, too, soft and low, like the sound of cloth being folded. Someone drops a net and blames the moon. Another pretends to fish with a banana leaf. No one's trying to win. They're just part of the night. Back in the canoe, you're invited to try a throw. Your net lands more like a crumpled napkin than a web, but Deddy claps anyway. "You're learning," he says. "Next time, maybe the fish will believe you." Scholars have tried to track the origins of this particular fishing tradition, but the trail always seems to fade in the rainforest. Some say it's thousands of years old. Others argue it's a fusion of techniques from trade routes long forgotten. Either way, no written records exist. Only hands and memories. And maybe that's the point. The knowledge isn't stored in books, it's stored in fingers, in river currents, in the patience between casts. You're not just fishing tonight. You're borrowing something. Something ancient, soft, and sticky. Something spun by spiders, sung by humans, and trusted by fish. As you drift back toward shore, a breeze picks up. The nets are bundled and wrung dry. The lanterns flicker. A child on the riverbank waves, holding up a wriggling fish proudly. Everyone claps. Not because it's big, but because it's hers. You've only been here a day, but already, the world you knew feels like a blur. Out here, everything is slower, softer, more intentional. Even the act of catching dinner feels like storytelling, one strand at a time. The nets, now damp and glittering with the shimmer of river water, are spread gently across flat stones to dry. Morning hasn't quite broken yet. There's only the blue-gray hush before sunrise, when the trees are just silhouettes and the air smells like moss and wood smoke. You sit on a low stool beside Deddy, watching as he checks the spider silk strands for damage. One tear. Just a small one, near the edge. You wouldn't have seen it if he hadn't pointed it out. This, he says, holding up the frayed thread, is what happens when you get greedy. I pulled too hard. He doesn't seem upset, just respectful. The silk remembers. Spider silk nets are delicate, yes, but they're also surprisingly durable, if treated properly. You learn that after every fishing trip, the net must be washed in river water, never salt, dried in the shade, never sun, and folded with the knots aligned, just so. Each net is stored in a leaf pouch that smells faintly of eucalyptus. According to Deddy, the scent keeps ants away. And bad dreams too, he adds with a wink. As the village stirs awake, others begin their morning net rituals. You see an elderly woman combing her net with fingers as practiced as a harpist's. A boy no older than 10 ties his first net under his grandfather's supervision. It's messy, sure, but the knots are full of hope. There's no factory here. No machines. Everything is made, repaired, and passed on by hand. You ask how long a net lasts. Deddy shrugs. Depends on the person. And the spiders. You pause. The spiders. He nods. Some silk is stronger than others. Depends what they've eaten. Where they built their webs. If it rained last week. If you were polite when you collected it. He's not joking, and you stop yourself before asking for a scientific explanation. Because here, the science isn't written on a whiteboard, it's tangled in webbing and whispered in riverside jokes. Curious, you offer to help repair the tear. Deddy hands you a tiny bone needle, smooth and sharp, and guides your fingers through the repair. It's hard. Really hard. The thread is nearly invisible against your skin, and the tension has to be just right. Too tight, and it snaps. Too loose, and the fish will slip through. Now you see why we don't sell these in shops, he says, grinning. And you do. You really do. It's not just about the fishing, it's about the entire rhythm of this place. From catching the spiders to repairing the net, from singing on the river to drying things just right, the process is, well, slow. But beautifully slow. It forces you to pay attention, to listen, to care. You learn that each net has a name, often something poetic. Morning echo, shadow weaver, first rain. Deddy's net is called Wing of Silence. He says he named it after a dream he had, where a bird flew over a river without making a sound, and the fish all rose to greet it. I know it's silly, he says, but the fish like poetry. Historians, when they even bother to study this fishing method, tend to focus on the novelty of the silk. They run tensile strength tests. They theorize about industrial applications. One academic paper claims that spider silk could replace nylon in high-end fishing gear, if only the harvesting process weren't so inefficient. Villagers laugh at that word. What's inefficient, they ask, about catching exactly what you need? That's a pattern you're beginning to notice. The outside world sees scarcity where the village sees balance. Progress where the village sees patience. Innovation where the village sees continuity. And here's something you didn't expect. no one hoards nets. Each family has one, maybe two. If a neighbor's net is damaged beyond repair, someone always lends theirs. Because if they don't, the fish stop biting. That's not a superstition, it's just how it works. You sit there, surrounded by nets drying like laundry in the breeze, and realize this is less a fishing village and more a web. A literal one, sure, but also social, personal, philosophical. Everyone connected, held together by threads too fine to see but too strong to break. Daddy hands you a cup of hot, sweet tea. Today we rest, he says. Let the nets breathe. You take a sip and feel it, the quiet power of something spun, shared, and mended by hand. Not just spider silk, but the fabric of an entire way of life. The next morning, the mist still clings to the water like a half-forgotten dream, and the nets are ready. You help Daddy gather them, each one folded precisely, wrapped in leaf pouches, then tied to the end of a long bamboo pole. There's no urgency in the preparation, just rhythm. A kind of sacred routine, like tying your shoes before a long walk. Today, you're joining the fishing trip. You and Daddy head to the shore where a slender canoe awaits, carved from a single log, worn smooth by decades of use. It doesn't rock as you step in, which feels both reassuring and ominous. Either you're incredibly balanced, or this thing has seen more river mornings than you've seen alarm clocks. You push off. No motor, of course. Just a long pole, a gentle current, and silence. Real silence. Not the "I turned off my notifications" kind. The kind where you can hear your own thoughts, and then hear them stop. Daddy doesn't say much. He doesn't need to. Instead, he taps the side of the canoe 3 times, a signal, it turns out, to let the fish know you've arrived. You're not sure if it's meant seriously or symbolically, but you tap 3 times anyway, just in case. Once you reach a slow bend in the river, where the water is dark and still, the work begins. But work feels like the wrong word. There's no net tossing here. No wild flinging or shouting. Instead, Daddy unfurls the spider silk net like a scroll, his fingers moving slowly, carefully, reverently. Then, he lowers it. Not throws it. Lowers it. The net sinks beneath the water like a sigh, its nearly invisible threads vanishing into the shadows. You peer over the side of the canoe and, it's just water. Still, dark water. You start to wonder if anything is actually happening. Daddy holds his breath. You follow his lead. The forest watches. A few minutes pass. Then, movement. A ripple. A flick. A fish, not big, but plenty for a meal, struggles quietly in the threads. No thrashing. No drama. Just a soft twitch, like it's confused more than scared. Daddy pulls the net up in one smooth motion. The fish is caught. You stare at the net, dumbfounded. The threads are so thin they practically disappear in the sunlight, yet here it is, a living thing cradled by silk. How? You whisper. Daddy shrugs. They swim into the poem. You don't even ask. It makes as much sense as anything else. You repeat this process a few more times. Each time, the results are the same. Slow, steady, silent. It's not about volume. It's about rhythm, timing, respect. The spider silk isn't strong enough for deep-sea hauls, but for this gentle stretch of river, it's perfect. And here's something Daddy mentions casually, as he drains a bit of river water from his sandal. If you ever catch more than you need, the river stops listening. You raise an eyebrow. He just nods. You'll see. This idea, that nature responds to your intention, is everywhere here. You've read books that call it animism, eco-spirituality, even primitive belief systems. But when you're here, in it, with your fingers damp from pulling silk nets and your mind softened by still water, it doesn't feel primitive. It feels honest. Of course, historians have another take. They debate whether this method originated centuries ago or was influenced by trade contact with Southeast Asia. One theory suggests the technique mimics ancient Javanese bird snares. Another claims it evolved independently. purely from observing nature. To this day, academic papers argue over footnotes and timelines, but not one of them has actually paddled this river at dawn. You watch Daddy untangle a fish, gently, murmuring what you suspect is a thank you. It's not performative. It's not cute. It's just what you do here. Eventually, your little canoe returns to shore. The morning sun has risen high enough to paint the trees gold, and the village smells like firewood and frying roots. Daddy hands you one fish. Your catch, he says. It's not heavy, but it is enough. As you step onto the muddy bank, you feel it, the pace of life here. Slower, yes, but richer, too. Every motion has meaning. Every silence has shape. And somewhere between spider silk and river songs, you've started listening a little more closely. The sun is now fully awake, stretching across the treetops and warming your shoulders as you walk back toward the village. In your hand is the fish you caught, or rather, the one that swam into your net, gently, without a struggle. It's a small thing, but it carries a strange sense of pride. You didn't conquer the river. You collaborated with it. Daddy leads you to the part of the village that smells delicious before you even see it. Smoke curls lazily from a half-dozen clay ovens, while rows of bamboo racks glisten with drying fish. Women squat beside woven baskets, salting the catch with measured hands, humming tunes that seem older than the language you speak. This is where the real work begins, preserving the day's harvest. You follow a woman named Soa, who's in charge of today's smoking. She doesn't say much, but gestures you over with a quick nod and hands you a fish. Not yours, a slightly larger one, already gutted. She points to a row of sharpened sticks stuck into a clay mound, and you get the idea. Skewer, place, don't mess it up. You're careful. Not because you're being watched, but because you don't want to ruin the flow of this delicate choreography. Everyone here knows what they're doing, and they do it quietly, with the kind of confidence that doesn't need instructions. The smokehouse itself looks like a giant termite mound. It's domed, with little windows cut into the side, and smells of tamarind, sea air, and history. Fish go in raw, come out a golden color you'd never associate with river food. Not grilled. Not burnt. Just transformed. You peer inside. Tiny logs of local wood smolder in a bed of ash, not flamed but glowing. Soa explains, through gestures and a few shared words, that the wood choice matters. Too smoky, and the fish turns bitter. Too wet, and it rots. The perfect fire is one that almost forgets it's burning. While the fish cook, you're handed a drink, something sweet, cool, made from boiled tamarind pods. It's tangy, refreshing, and served in a cup made from a halved gourd. You take a sip and feel yourself exhale. This is the rhythm of things here. Fish, smoke, silk, gourd, river. But there's something else, something harder to spot at first. It's the way no one is rushing. Even though the food must be preserved before it spoils, no one is frantic. There's time. Or rather, time behaves differently here. A young boy wanders by, carrying a bundle of banana leaves. He pauses to wave, then sets them down beside the racks. You realize they're used to wrap the finished fish, sealing them from flies, from moisture, from the world. And it hits you. This entire process, fishing, smoking, wrapping, has almost no waste. No plastic. No electricity. No single-use anything. Just local materials, circular systems, and inherited wisdom. What modern experts now call sustainability, these villagers simply call Tuesday. Of course, you remember something you read. Researchers once documented similar smoking methods in coastal Vietnamese villages and even parts of Borneo. There's debate over whether these practices were shared through ancient trade routes or emerged independently. Either way, it seems like people who live close to water tend to figure out the same things, slowly and with purpose. You lean back, letting the smoke drift over your shoulders. It doesn't sting. Somehow, it smells comfortable, like a blanket you didn't know you missed. Soa hands you your original fish, now wrapped, smoked, and marked with a little leaf tucked under the string. A signature, maybe, or a blessing. You're not sure. But you bow slightly as you take it, and she nods back. Later, someone will boil cassava to go with the fish. Maybe some wild greens. Nothing fancy, but every bite will have a story behind it. A net, a river, a spider, a string. And as you sit on a low stool, watching shadows stretch across the earth, you begin to feel it. This isn't just food. It's memory made edible. Evening arrives slowly, like a heavy silk cloth drifting over the treetops. The buzz of insects swells and softens in rhythmic waves, and the shadows of the trees lengthen until they feel like extensions of the forest itself, reaching into the village with gentle fingers. You sit beneath a thatched awning, sipping the last of the tamarind drink, watching the community settle into its nighttime rituals. Children chase fireflies near the edge of the clearing, their laughter echoing like falling beads. An elder squats by the fire, carving a small canoe from a chunk of driftwood, not for function, but for a child's toy. Around you, dinner has already been eaten, dishes rinsed in a shared basin, and now everyone seems content to exist in a kind of communal exhale. No rush to go anywhere. No screens pulling attention away. Just being fully in the moment. You're pulled into a small gathering. They're weaving. Not baskets or fishing nets this time, but something that catches your breath, a ceremonial cloth. One woman gestures for you to come closer. She holds up a piece of spider silk thread, impossibly fine and yet gleaming like moonlight. You remember the net from earlier today and wonder how many spiders it takes to make something this long. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The cloth itself is narrow, no wider than your arm, but the pattern is intricate, geometric diamonds interlaced with curling shapes that resemble vines or rivers. You ask, haltingly, if it's for trade. They shake their heads. This is not for selling. This is for storytelling. Each design means something, and not in the way modern textiles have prints. This is a language of its own. One pattern speaks of the time the river flooded and brought fish to every doorstep. Another tells of a season when the spiders disappeared, and with them, the silk. That year was marked with hunger, but also cleverness, because someone figured out how to substitute fine tree bark fibers to mimic the silk's strength. It didn't work quite as well, but it held long enough to matter. The women show you how to twist the silk, not with brute force but with patience. You're given a tiny spindle, and you fumble with it until one of the girls, no older than 10, laughs and takes it from you. Her hands sure, her motion fluid. She's probably been doing this since she could walk. A detail flickers in your memory. An academic note, perhaps. Some historians argue that Madagascar's spider silk weaving is the only known example of large-scale non-industrial use of spider silk for textiles. Others contest this, pointing to fragmentary evidence in parts of South America. As with many things, the truth is fuzzy, tangled in the web of time. You look around. No one seems interested in debating origin stories. They're too busy creating. It's not about who did it first. It's about doing it now. Someone begins to sing. A low hum at first, then words, gentle, winding lyrics you don't understand, but feel. The melody wraps around you, and you feel your shoulders drop, your chest soften. It's not quite a lullaby, not quite a chant. Just a presence, made musical. A man joins in with a log drum, his hands moving like slow waves. No urgency, no performance, just rhythm. The firelight flickers on the silk in the weaver's lap, making it glow as if it's lit from within. And you sit there, cross-legged, a bit of smoke in your hair, your fingers still slightly sticky from the tamarind. You think, not for the first time today, how small your world had felt before you arrived here. And how, strangely, you don't feel like a stranger anymore. Later, someone hands you a rolled mat and points to a quiet spot under the trees. You lie down, staring up at the slice of stars between the canopy. The air smells of wood smoke and fresh river. You hear the tail end of the song, now more hum than words. A breeze shifts a branch. Something tiny, probably a beetle, clicks across your mat. And just before sleep wraps you in its own silk, you realize, you don't even know what day it is. You haven't needed to. You wake to the sound of rustling leaves and the faint thud of footsteps on soft soil. Morning in the village doesn't start with alarms or traffic, it simply unfolds. The first thing you notice is the scent. Slightly sweet, slightly earthy, like ripened bananas and fresh rain. A rooster crows somewhere, but it sounds less like an alarm and more like a sleepy suggestion. You sit up on your woven mat, stretching beneath a sky that's already warming to a soft gold. Around you, people are moving, not quickly, not slowly, just purposefully. The fishermen are already gone, their spider silk nets taken with them to the nearby inlets. But the rest of the village is buzzing with another kind of work, preparation. A new structure is going up. It's small, maybe a storage shed or a community drying hut. You're not sure yet. What you are sure of is that everyone seems to know what to do. No blueprints, no shouting, just shared muscle memory. One person brings palm ribs, another lays down a lattice of bamboo strips. Children ferry tools back and forth, their bare feet kicking up little clouds of dust. You're handed a bundle of vines, surprisingly strong, and gestured toward the side of the frame. Your job is to bind the horizontal beams to the vertical ones. Simple knots, nothing fancy. Someone double-checks your first one with a nod, and you feel oddly proud. The construction techniques aren't flashy, but they're brilliant in their own way. The entire thing is modular. No nails. No adhesives. If needed, the structure can be disassembled and moved, or replaced entirely, with minimal effort. You recall reading that Amazonian peoples often designed for impermanence. It wasn't that things weren't built to last. It was that life itself moved, and so should the home. A man next to you uses a tool that catches your eye, a sort of handheld scraper made from turtle shell. He's smoothing the ends of reeds to slot them into place. You ask about it, and through a combination of gestures and borrowed words, he explains it's called a fit rana, used for shaping, cleaning, even sometimes skinning fish. Multi-purpose tools are valued here, not for being fancy, but for being dependable. The heat builds steadily, and someone brings around a clay jug of something refreshing. You sip, it's lightly fermented fruit juice, tangy with a slight effervescence. A local energy drink, in its own right. Then someone nearby makes a small cheer. A beam has been hoisted into place and secured. The mood lifts. You're not just watching a structure rise, you're part of it. And even though your work isn't perfect, no one minds. Participation matters more than precision. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow and take in the scene. Behind you, the river glints like a moving mirror. A group of women are rinsing clothes at the shallows, scrubbing them against smooth stones. One child is trying to catch fish with a scoop made from an old gourd. A toddler toddles by holding a stick longer than his entire body. There's a deep rhythm to all this, a choreography of living. And while it may look simple through a modern lens, it's anything but. The systems are invisible until you step into them. Food, shelter, tools, culture, all interconnected like the web of a spider. You remember again that historians have argued over what qualifies as civilization. Some used to believe dense cities, stone temples, and written records were essential criteria. But you think of this place, with its adaptive buildings, communal knowledge, and intricate craftsmanship, and realize that definition feels narrow. The new hut's roof is finally complete, its woven top casting perfect dappled shade. The man with the turtle shell scraper wipes his hands on his sarong and offers you a smile. Not a grand celebration, just the contentment of something made together. Someone strikes a small metal bell to mark midday. Not a call to prayer or a school bell, just a marker, a shared moment. You sit in its echo, the hum of the forest now your background music. And in that moment, you wonder, when was the last time you helped build something that would outlast a calendar day? The midday sun filters through the canopy in broken rays, dappling the ground like shifting mosaics. You sit with your back against a tree trunk, sipping more of that fermented fruit drink, watching the light dance on the forest floor. There's a break now, a collective pause. Work gives way to rest, not by schedule, but by feel. No clocks, just the language of shadows. The afternoon is spent in a different kind of classroom. You follow a narrow path behind the village, ducking under liana vines and over mossy roots, to where a small gathering is forming. A woman named Rolla is sitting cross-legged with 3 children around her. In her hands, a spider silk net, still being formed. The children watch intently, their fingers mimicking her motions in the air, as if learning choreography. You're invited to sit and observe. Rolla doesn't speak much, but her hands tell the story. She holds out 2 thin twigs with strands stretched between them, and with a deft twist of her fingers, she begins braiding. Not the kind of braiding you know, this is more like coaxing. The silk has to be kept taut, but not stressed. Too dry and it breaks. Too moist and it sticks. She dips her fingers in a gourd of water to keep them damp, and now and then dabs a tiny bead onto the silk to control its tension. You ask where she learned this, and she smiles, gesturing upward. From my mother and her mother, she says, her voice soft like rustling leaves. No notebooks. No online tutorials. Just memory passed from hand to hand. The children try too. Their lines aren't straight, and their knots are more blobs than bonds, but Rolla encourages them all the same. The patience here is generational. No one expects perfection, only participation. You look closer and notice something strange. The net's design changes slightly every few inches. Rolla is adjusting based on purpose. Some strands are spaced wider, others tighter, depending on which fish they're trying to catch. This isn't just net making. It's species-specific engineering. Nearby, another elder joins the circle. He brings with him a bundle of banana leaves and begins demonstrating how to wrap the nets when not in use. The silk needs rest too, he jokes. You learn that keeping the net covered in leaves helps preserve its elasticity and prevents it from drying out in the sun. Who knew spider silk had a nap schedule? The elders debate something now, and you catch a few words. Apparently, there's an ongoing argument. Some believe adding strands from certain Argiope spiders makes the net too stiff, while others say it's the only way to catch silverfish during the rainy months. A village disagreement, yes, but also, quietly, a form of peer-reviewed science. You realize you're witnessing a living archive. These people are historians and engineers and naturalists all at once. And unlike the textbooks you grew up with, this history breathes, adjusts, and responds to new conditions. As the afternoon wanes, Rolla hands you a small, imperfect circle of netting, a beginner's braid, made by one of the children. For luck, she says, and ties it around your wrist. It's lighter than cotton, barely there, but strangely grounding. You think about how this knowledge, so tactile and intimate, has existed for centuries without fanfare. No monuments, no museums, just families sitting in circles, teaching by doing. The kind of legacy that doesn't make headlines, but outlasts them. And as you stand and stretch your legs, brushing leaf litter from your clothes, you can't help but feel a little transformed. Not because you've mastered the craft, but because you've touched a thread that stretches back through time, still unbroken. Later that evening, just as the last hints of golden light slip away behind the canopy, you find yourself drawn to the riverbank again. This time, there's no fishing or gathering. Just a group of villagers sitting quietly on a long wooden log, watching the water shimmer beneath the waxing moon. Someone hands you a cup. It's warm, herbal, and smells faintly of lemongrass and something woodsy. A night infusion, they explain, to help with dreaming. You take a cautious sip. It's bitter, but it settles quickly in your chest, like your lungs just exhaled something you didn't realize they were holding. Tonight is for stories. One by one, the villagers begin to speak. Not to you, specifically, but to each other, in a rhythm that feels older than words. Some stories are playful. One about a monkey who tricked a jaguar with a fake beard, another about a fish that turned into a bird to avoid being eaten. Others are quieter, heavier. Tales of ancestors, of migrations, of rivers that once flowed differently. You don't understand every word, but the tone carries you. The laughter, the pauses, the occasional silence so full it feels like a fourth storyteller. One elder stands and begins a chant, low, repetitive, somewhere between a lullaby and a warning. You feel the hair on your arms lift, not in fear, but in recognition. This is not performance. This is memory in motion. Beside you, a boy no older than 10 is threading dried beetle wings onto a string. You ask what he's making. A wind necklace, he says. For my brother. You glance around. There is no brother in sight. He shrugs, like that's not the point. Then, as if on cue, someone begins weaving palm leaves into a shape you don't recognize. You watch it form, an odd, bulbous net with no clear entrance. They explain it's used to catch insects, not fish, and only in one very specific spot upriver. It's designed based on how certain bugs move, not where they are, but where they'll be. Predictive design, learned from observation, passed through bedtime stories and fireside instructions. The conversation turns to a debate. Some argue that spider silk should never be used alone, that it always needs a plant-based frame. Others insist that pure silk, properly braided, lasts longer and folds better. You realize, once again, that you are sitting in a natural laboratory, where nothing is standardized but everything is tested. Someone brings up a curious fact. A certain spider's web only becomes waterproof if harvested before sunrise. No one knows why. Scientists have visited, taken samples, but haven't figured it out yet. Maybe the spider preys in the morning, someone jokes. Laughter erupts, then fades back into the hush of nighttime. A child asks an elder why spiders are allowed to live in the corners of the houses, and the elder says, because they remember. No one questions the answer. You lean back, your eyes tracing the silhouettes of the trees above, where stars peek through the dense net of leaves. You realize how much is held here, not just in bodies or brains, but in practices, in instincts, in jokes and rituals that double as survival guides. There's no written record, no ink on paper, but you're surrounded by archives, bound by memory, held together with silk, sap, and song. You don't say anything. You just listen. Because sometimes, listening is the only thing history asks of you. By morning, the rhythm of life is already in motion again. You wake not to an alarm, but to the gentle clatter of bamboo poles being rearranged and the distant, syncopated tapping of someone preparing the day's fish for curing. The air smells slightly sweet, like fermenting fruit and morning dew settling on wood smoke. You're invited to help with the drying process today. Something that looks simple at first glance but, of course, turns out to be a quiet art form. The fish are split open and gently pressed flat, but not too flat. Then they're laid on a lattice made of reeds and left to dry on racks angled just so, facing the direction of the morning breeze but shielded from direct sun. Too much heat, and it dries bitter, someone warns. Nearby, a woman fans a small fire under a dome of thin sticks. This is a cool smoke, they explain, used not for cooking but for keeping insects away from the drying fish. You notice the smoke drifts horizontally instead of rising, and when you point it out, she nods. Spider trick, she says. We learned from their burrows. They know how to work with the wind. You look at the dome again. It really does resemble a spider's retreat, tight, controlled, and purposeful. At one point, a man arrives carrying a bundle of green leaves tied with string. He lays them on a flat rock and slowly unwraps them to reveal long strands of spider silk. Golden, almost translucent in the sun. Some are stretched across tiny frames, like miniature looms. Others are wound into tight, springy cords. You lean closer. It's mesmerizing. These strands, thinner than thread, are incredibly strong. One woman taps a silk line lightly and says, "This one caught 3 fish. In one splash." They show you how the cords are knotted, not like shoelaces or sailor's knots, but in looping patterns that resemble vines and river meanders. These knots aren't just functional, they're mnemonic. Each shape has a meaning. Some are warnings, avoid this bend in the river. Others are blessings, fertility, calm water, long nets. You run your fingers over the knots and realize they are both map and prayer, tied into thread. Later, during a break, you sit in the shade and ask someone how old this tradition is. They don't give you a date. Instead, they say, older than forgetting. You let that settle. Historians have tried to trace the origin of this practice, but the records are sparse. Some argue it's only a few hundred years old. Others believe it dates back millennia, inherited from ancestors who lived in stilted villages now swallowed by jungle. The truth, as always, is tangled, just like silk. As you sip from a carved cup filled with something that tastes like river herbs and tamarind, a young boy walks by carrying a net taller than himself. The mesh is almost invisible, but when the light hits just right, it gleams gold. He sees you watching and grins. "You want to try?" he asks. You hesitate, but then nod. He hands it over like he's passing down a secret. Not just a tool, but a piece of knowledge, soft and strong, woven into every loop. You realize, holding that net, that this isn't about survival alone. It's about care, attention, a kind of craftsmanship that turns dinner into devotion. You follow the boy down to the water's edge, barefoot now, your soles adjusting to the warm, spongy mud. The river shimmers in the low light, casting gentle ripples that break like whispered secrets. In your hands, the spider silk net feels almost weightless, like holding a gust of air shaped by intention. The boy doesn't say much. He simply steps into the water and gestures for you to follow. You wade in slowly. It's not cold, just alive, soft currents swirling past your legs like vines searching for footing. The river bottom is a mosaic of smooth stones, forgotten tools, and the occasional glint of something ancient and rusted. Someone might call it debris. The locals would call it memory. You both stop at a shallow bend where the current slows and minnows dart between your ankles. The boy points, then drops his net with one graceful flick, like casting a spell. You try to mimic it. Yours lands more like a collapsed hammock. He chuckles quietly, but not unkindly. You try again, adjusting the arc of your arms. This time, the net stretches in midair, glinting gold in the sunlight before settling like a whisper over the water. It's beautiful. You can't tell if you've caught anything yet, but it already feels like a success. A few moments later, you tug the net back in. One fish, a small, flickering ribbon of silver, is caught in the weave. You let out a soft laugh, part relief, part surprise. The boy nods. "Dinner," he says, matter of fact. Then he adds, "Maybe breakfast too." Back on shore, the net is cleaned and laid carefully to dry. You take a moment to look around. The community hums quietly, like a song without a melody. People work without rush, without clocking in or out, following a rhythm older than timekeeping. You wonder how much of this knowledge will survive the next century, or the next decade. Some researchers have debated whether this spider silk technique originated independently in Madagascar or came from trade routes long forgotten. There's no consensus. Some argue that the silk might have once been ceremonial, used in rituals, not just food gathering. A few even suggest it was linked to seasonal patterns or used to predict floods. But no one knows for sure. The villagers don't explain it in academic terms. They say, "It works. That's why we keep doing it." As the sun dips lower, fires are lit and the smell of grilled fish begins to drift through the trees. The boy's family waves you over. They hand you a woven leaf parcel, unwrapped to reveal your tiny silver catch, cooked with herbs and set beside a mound of soft starch that tastes like something between yam and sweet potato. It's not fancy, but it's sacred in its simplicity. The meal is shared without fanfare, passed hand to hand, bite to bite. You chew slowly, aware that this flavor, of river and smoke and spider silk, has no recipe. It only exists in this place, with these people, under this sky. After dinner, someone begins to hum. Not a song you recognize, but one that fits perfectly in the background of dusk. The boy sits beside you, the net beside him coiled like a sleeping creature. You both watch the fire. It crackles softly, like silk threads brushing against each other in the dark. The night arrives slowly, without announcement. No honking cars, no glowing billboards. Just stars, more than you remember ever seeing, and the low murmur of a river that keeps no secrets and tells no lies. You lie back, full and tired in the best way, the kind of tired that only comes from doing something real, something ancient. You feel the earth below you and the sky above, and between them, that silken thread of human effort, woven again and again through generations, catching more than fish, catching memory. The fire's glow has faded to embers now, and the village settles into a kind of hush that feels older than language. You lie still, your breath sinking with the sounds around you, the low rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the ever-steady whisper of the river nearby. It's not silence exactly, but something gentler, the world exhaling. Your thoughts begin to float, lighter than before, drifting like the silk nets on water. The taste of the meal lingers faintly on your tongue, earthy and faintly sweet. You think of the boy's quiet smile, the way his fingers moved through the net without needing to look. You remember how the villagers shared not just food, but time. How nothing here felt rushed or wasted. It all moved at the pace of trust. And as your eyes grow heavier, the sky above feels impossibly wide, as if even your dreams could stretch out into it without ever touching the edges. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be threaded in silk, and your rest be as deep as the river.